poll, so I'm going to go ahead and talk through the results. It looks like we have about the vast majority actually are undecided, which is not terribly surprising, followed closely by hybrid courses, so partially in person and partially online, which is where the blended learning strategies can really help out. There's a few folks who are going to be 10% or so are going to be on campus with online support. Only 5% are actually going to be on campus. And then we have 2% coming in at other. Good news for this, everyone has a learning management system. That is fantastic. That's at 90%. Folks are using, 50% are using Google Docs. We've got live video capture at 60%. External docs shared in class, images and pictures and polls running in the 50 to 30% range. Some 30% are using plagiarism software as well to sort of help with monitoring what their students are doing, and then 20% content library and some other. So. All right, so let's roll in to who we are. So I think everyone knows who Instructure is, but I'll give Jared a brief minute after I say who 42 Lines is. So the reason we're in the EdTech space is that, as I said, I tried to go into education and failed because it was difficult. So focusing on education, we've been doing boutique software, custom software for universities for a decade. One of our first large projects was moving a university into online mode from Onsite and dealing with all the culture change that required. So not just technology, but how do you get your people to be able to embrace moving online? And we bounced around a lot in different K-12, early childhood education, higher ed space. And then recently we've gotten into product development where we're taking what we know and churning it out so that more people can use it and we can have a broader impact with the things we've learned over the past decade. And Jared, you want to do quick on Instructure just in case someone doesn't know who Instructure is?
Absolutely. So Instructure is the maker of educational technology, most well known for the Canvas learning management system. So we've been around for over 10, 11 years now, and we're continuously the fastest growing in K-12 and in higher education around the world.
Cool. All right, so what we're going to talk about today: online, on-site, everything in between. It's kind of a crazy world right now. These stats probably changed from the time we made this slide until now. It's moving that quickly, but 64% of colleges are planning to resume in-person instruction. I don't know if that's still true today. That was true last week. 36% are waiting to decide. So it's just this constantly fast-moving ecosystem. The California State University just declared they're going virtual. I think that was 2 weeks ago. Southern New Hampshire University is looking at all the different models they can do online, hybrid, et cetera. Beloit is going hybrid, and we'll explain what hybrid calendar means in a little bit. Purdue is planning to fall, but are working on backup plans. It's across the board. So basically, we're all in this mode of like, what are we doing? What the heck's going on? And so the question is, how do we deal with that? What is it that we're going to end up in, and how do we best prep since we don't know where we're going to end up? What are some of the things that can apply to all the different modes so that you can at least get some training in place that can help you as things shift? Because even if we do have a plan to start with, who knows what's actually going to happen? So if people don't follow this blog, Phil on EdTech, I highly recommend it. The graphic we have here, I think, sums up 6 different possibilities that we're looking at, running from fully online to hybrid, whether your class sizes are going to shrink, et cetera. I saw an EDUCAUSE article that highlighted 15 different scenarios we can be in. So the fact that a lot of you are undecided is not surprising, but what we're going to roll into now real quick is Jared, who is beyond just his role at Instructure. He's actually written books on blended learning. He's going to give a quick overview of what blended learning is, because it's kind of the time-proven, research-proven way of moving things into an online world. He's going to give you an overview now of what that is, and then we'll roll into how that can impact training.
Great, right, thanks, Marcus. Yeah, as Marcus said, I spent a lot of my career focused on online and blended and hybrid models of learning, specifically helping faculty develop and design those courses. And as you guys probably know, blending is essentially a mix of face-to-face or on-site learning activities with computer-mediated or online activities as well. And when we look back, I see blended as emerging as a practice, really in response to a couple of factors in technology enhanced teaching. One is that with online only courses, especially in the early days, these experiences sort of developed a reputation for being text heavy, for being kind of independent study-ish, and resulting in a level of social isolation, a level of psychological distance between the students and the instructor that really, presented it as a way that was not a very human teaching or learning experience on either side, certainly not when compared to the dynamics of the face-to-face classroom. And it's probably due to that early reputation, those early experiences, that many teaching faculty and instructors today dislike online and believe that it's not as effective as traditional face-to-face instruction, even though the majority of instruction in higher ed today is still following that lecture model. So speaking of that lecture model, nowadays, as we look at what happens in those face-to-face classrooms, some of us are starting to think that it's more remote than we may have expected, especially as students have their own devices and the connectivity that they bring so that they can really distract themselves from that classroom experience. And so I think because of these factors, blended began to emerge as an important way of considering teaching. And today, most faculty actually prefer to blend their courses in higher education and K-12. So as that MindWires diagram shows, there are many ways to think about blending, especially with regards to fall semester and perhaps even 2021. I like to think about it as a spectrum as well, although it's probably more multidimensional. So when I talk with instructors about blending, I emphasize the fact that, yes, it is a mix of online and face-to-face. It is a mix of synchronous and asynchronous, but really your blend should be a deliberate selection of teaching and learning activities, of tools and environments chosen to maximize the strengths of each and to minimize the limitations. And it's important to recognize those strengths and limitations because that will help guide instructors through the blended course design process. So here are a few of those strengths for each environment. Onsite is going to be familiar to everyone. It's what most of us grew up with. And it allows us to focus the entire class group on a specific topic or a specific presentation. And of course, the on-site environment is multi-sensory, which really lends it that sense of humanness and that fidelity that is important for some presentations and some learning activities. Now, online, as we've talked about before, is more participatory. That is to say, if you have an online discussion, every student can participate, and they are not limited by the amount of time that we have before the bell rings. Online is more flexible. Students have more choice in terms of whether they come to the school building, how they do activities, when they do activities, and to this point about being repeatable, how often they review materials. And we also have the advantage of being able to give students some automatic feedback on some of those activities. So this idea that blending allows instructors and designers to pick the environment that gives them the best of both worlds is one of the reasons why research that looks at blended learning versus online versus face-to-face tends to find that there is an advantage to blending for student outcomes. Now, there are some confounding variables here, but I think it's that potential of choosing the best of both worlds that really creates the advantages that research shows. So now I want to take a quick look at some of the different types of blended courses. The first, which was popularized about a decade ago, is what we call the flipped classroom. And the flipped classroom is really just about taking the instruction, and in the early days, it was simply taking the lectures that teachers would give and put those online, digitize those, make videos, for example, so that students can watch those on their own time and gain some of that benefit of being able to review those videos. And then it takes the quote unquote homework or the practice that students might be doing on their own, and it brings that back into the on-site environment, into the classroom. So it can be more hands-on, it can be collaborative, or teachers can monitor students' progress. The second type is the hybrid course. Now, the hybrid course starts by taking one or more class sessions and reducing those so that there is learning online. Now, we might think that it's just about taking, say, the Wednesday class and moving that session online, but it actually can be a lot more than that. When I talk about hybrid courses, I like to think about anything that happens outside of that physical classroom as being the potential for online activities. So instead of just having a session, think about the environment of online as this stream of potential activities with connection points to those face-to-face sessions, in this case, the Monday and the Friday. And that leads to the third model, which is known as HyFlex. Now, HyFlex was originated by Brian Beatty, and basically what he said is the ideal scenario for students would be a course that is fully online or face-to-face, right? So a HyFlex course requires that the materials and the activities can all be done online, but it also maintains a face-to-face schedule of some sort so students can pick and choose. And we've seen a lot of great variations on this model to maximize flexibility for students and potentially increase performance as well. Now, with all of these blended models, the most important thing in my mind is that deliberate choice of the environment to suit the learning outcomes, but also the connection between those two environments. And so this is where we can talk about discussions a little bit, because discussions provide a really great way to take what might be happening in a face-to-face session and continue that online so that students can start face-to-face, move online with the discussion, enrichen it, increase the participation, and then teachers guide them back in the on-site session to continue that or expand that or focus in on a specific thread.
All right. So I'm going to figure out now, how do you take all of those proven concepts and how do you bring them into your training plan in a way that works? So important when you're running through this is to focus on, let's not leave different learning styles behind. Let's not leave through equity issues, people with disabilities behind. And we struggled with that a lot in the springtime, but coming into fall, a lot of what we're going to talk about as well is how do we take advantage of those things Jared was talking about that are useful in online, that flexibility, the equal contribution, and make sure we don't lose those in this fall. And so what kind of techniques can we use as we get there? So this is a slide Heather put together showing that milk and cereal, Harmonize and Instructure. That's touting our own horn a little bit, but making that discussion a little bit richer, a little bit easier to use, or a lot richer, a lot easier to use. Okay, so when you're training and your instructors, you might think, okay, I need to get a full professional development thing in place, but that is expensive. That is time consuming. If you can do that, yes, do that, because it's going to be a good start to get everybody grounded in what is blended learning, what are we going to do, how are you going to interact with these tools. But a lot of you may not have time to do that, given the tuition crunch. You may not have budget to do that. And even if your instructors are on a 9-month contract, you may not even have the instructors to do that. So how do we come up with some techniques to be able to, augment that if we could do professional development, or just do the best we can when we come back from summer and our instructors are now in place? So we like to start with what instructors had to learn. They all took a crash course in how to do Zoom or any sort of video conferencing. But then we like to say, okay, well, based on those blended learning techniques we were just talking about, let's give them a blueprint of, it's fine to continue to do what you did in spring. You did an in-person lecture, but here, look at these blended learning techniques and make sure you weave it into your discussion. So before the in-person class happens, give them the idea that they need to post something in the discussion that is a prompt for what they're going to talk about in class. And then kind of playing on that HyFlex model, record the class if you can, and copy that recording back in to the discussion. If you're using our tool, we record it back in from Zoom automatically for you. But the idea is, like, make sure it's recorded. If you can get a caption transcript of it for those students who need captioning, and be able to pull that back in. So it's that graph that Jared showed of like, take what they know, the face-to-face instruction via Zoom, and weave that back and forth between the tools. So from your discussion into face-to-face via Zoom, or face-to-face in classroom, if that's what you're doing, and then back and forth, so that you can either get a fully blended model or hybrid model. Let's say you can't use video conferencing because of equity issues or bandwidth issues or whatever. You should be able to do similar things by having them add in replacement content for their instructors, for their instruction that they found on the internet, be it YouTube videos, be it embedding links into their discussion, so that the content is still there. It doesn't have to be the instructor talking. And in some ways, it's easier on the instructor if they can reference external materials, because they don't have to build a lecture and actually do the discussion, depending on the instructor type. But be able to encourage them to make sure that they are replacing what would be a lecture, either with a lecture recording or with rich media as they're going. If it's not on the web, if they recorded it on their iPhone, make sure they're getting that content into the discussion. People are pretty accepting right now of being in this together, and things may not be exactly as they were. So even an iPhone recording is better than nothing. So, drag those into your discussion, have them uploaded so that they're available. Continue that model, though, of blending from the discussion into the content, back into the discussion as you go. So how do you put this into practice? So it's fine to say instructors need to do that, but how do you actually make that happen? And how do you make those asynchronous sessions work well? So to start with, we're going to talk about training your students. Often we talk about training instructors, but it is equally as important to train your students, because if they come on and they're anxious, they're not going to be able to do well. A study before this pandemic even started showed that 63% of students felt anxiety. Of those 63%, 23% were already in treatment for it, for some sort of stress. Take that into the pandemic, and I'm sure it's worse. So how do you train your students? And then how do you leverage the training you did to those students to make your instructors' jobs easier and make the classroom work better? Because students are something we all have. We all have to train, and we all can use this sort of we're all in this together mentality. So to start with, you need to assess what's going on with your students. Where are they at? So instead of jumping straight into assignments and creating that stress of like they're trying to perform in a learning management system, in a discussion forum, without having the pressure of grades on them, give them something that is an icebreaker, that is not graded. We call it pausing for kittens. So creating a safe space for them to be able to go in, introduce themselves, introduce what they know about the topic at hand, and give them a space to be able to ask for help. Make that space exist throughout the entire semester, because you need that touch point of what are your students knowing, how are they feeling, what's going on, and that space for them to interact, to try to counterbalance some of that isolation that Jared was talking about. The important part of this, though, is that you as the instructor, or your instructors, if you're not an instructor, are learning about how well your students interact in a discussion. You can actually make the first assignment be go talk about kittens. That way you're driving them in to participate, and you can see how well they use the tools and how well they know the content. For those then that know the content well or use the tools well, um, pull them in as a student facilitator. So for those that don't know what student facilitation is, this is research backed. Let's get your students to actually help facilitate the discussion, peer-to-peer learning. It's amazing for the facilitator. It's actually proven to be better in some cases, many cases, for the students themselves to learn from a peer. And because you did that icebreaker and you were able to kind of see who was going to be good at it, you start picking the people early on when they're nervous about the class to be the facilitators to kind of help drive the conversation. This is important because it frees up time for your instructors, because they're going to be stressed, unbelievably so. They're going to be trying to learn other aspects as well of the learning management system. And so having the students there to continue that discussion and keep that discussion lively when they're in the classroom, super useful as they go. If you do have a chat client of some sort, be a great thing to turn on for your classroom, because it gives you that other touch point to be able to communicate one-on-one with those facilitators or students who are on the point of dropping out, to be able to reach out to them and have a quick chat about what they're doing as you go. Okay, so that works great to be able to get the students on to help, but then you have this whole cadre of instructors who are new to this. So this particular thing I'm going to discuss is mainly focused on those who already have some sort of online presence, and you have some instructors that know how to do it and how to do the workload. Um, so what we're going to talk about here is what I call a work exchange, which is this idea that you need to pair your online instructors with your on-site instructors. And as soon as I say this to people, they're like pairing, oh my God, the online instructors, that's more work on them. What are they going to do? Oh, the on-site instructors, how are they going to be able to cope with that? But what we're proposing and what we've seen work is that you don't do it as a straight mentoring relationship. Those on-site instructors already know how to do some things that could be useful to the online instructor. They know how to use Zoom. They know how to host lectures. They can do guest lecturing for the online class. They also need to learn how to get into that discussion forum, and that's a skill they need to practice. They can come into the online discussion forum to participate in that online class to help the online instructor out. That then makes the online instructor feel a little more grateful, have a little more time, and can turn around and help those on-site instructors with things that they may have no idea how to do or are just lost to be able to do. That might be how to build a good assignment online, and they can share their assignments inside their system. Um, it might be teaching them how to set up a syllabus in the LMS. It might be how to create content and share some of the content they've already authored over to that on-site instructor. So training in the trenches, you kind of have to play on this idea that we're all in this together. It's a global pandemic. And this is really what is motivating people now to be more open than they were perhaps last year to this idea of teaching online or helping each other out. Now it's this, we have to, we don't have a choice. And so trying to set up some sort of work exchange as you go to be able to encourage that back and forth between the instructors, both online and on-site, experienced and non-experienced. Or even if you just have an on-site instructor who is crushing it, even though they just started, pair them with someone who's not to be able to help as well, and have them trade work so that it balances out a little more. All right, so I just gave one example there. I mentioned earlier that Jared's an author, so 42 Lines is buying 10 of his books, and what I'd like to hear from you guys in the Q&A pod is what other type of work exchange could you see working like that? So I mentioned being able to exchange a guest lecture for some help building a syllabi. So we're going to ship these things to you. The first 10 ideas that come through, throw them in the Q&A pod. And Jared, I don't know if you have more thoughts on the pain points of the type of thing that people.
Well, so Madeline, who's here in the webinar with us, just asked a question that I think is really important. So as you talk about leveraging experts, I think the idea is that innovation will diffuse throughout the school or the district. Madeline says that my district is moving to Canvas. We don't have any experts. How would we go through that together? I think that's a great question to ask the rest of the community, whether it's Canvas or any technology. How can you build that core group of experts who are then responsible for and empowered to spread that word throughout the school or the district?
Yeah, and that's starting from scratch is a tough one. I wish I had better advice on that. So if you do have advice for her, throw it in the Q&A pod and we will share that out as well to the larger group.
Hey, Marcus, Ellen Fisher also said that I see sharing across colleges.
Oh, between different departments and different colleges. And are you saying that you are seeing that, or is that's something that could work? Because it definitely could work. It invalidates some of the ideas of like sharing content because your content isn't going to cross over per se, but definitely in terms of participating in the discussion forums as well. The student facilitation is still valid there.
Yep, and we have another one where it said we are doing a Faculty Friday, trying to get as many faculty on board on how they are able to solve problems, what features of Canvas work best for them. It's just a big meeting collaborating.
Yeah, and I wonder if you couldn't break it into almost working groups focused on like, I'm the expert in building a good syllabus. I'm an expert in building good assignments, and have people become the experts in those things, because then they're learning a small slice of what Canvas can do, or Blackboard or whatever other tool you're learning. But to be able to sort of focus, because you don't have much time, focus in on that and then come back and share ideas from the group as well.
So we're getting tons of ideas. So I'm just going to read off a couple and let you chime in, but more and more keep coming in. So I'm planning on hosting a virtual conference this summer, hoping someone from each school will join and rise as a tech leader liaison to help us prepare for fall in the future. Trade videos within the discipline. Students are typically eager to engage using tools. So this will play into new tools. Sorry, I read that one too soon. Create a discussion board or chat channel for faculty to contribute to and share ideas and questions with one another.
I'm curious, back
to
the...
of those ideas spark additional ideas. One is that as you try to create or to try to find those experts or those innovators or those creative folks in the community, make sure you have good ways for them to share what they're learning and to reward them, even if that reward is just in terms of recognition. Also, that idea about leveraging students is so important. One, students tend to be the biggest advocates for good use of technology in blending and ways of connecting with their peers. But two, if you're not sure what to do in a class with technology, or you're working with instructors who aren't sure what to do, ask the students and encourage your teachers to ask the students. They'll tell you, and it won't take a lot of time for you to start to get some really clear ideas on what you should do next.
And let me add to that, that now is not the time to appear as if you have all the answers. It's a perfect time to be humble and say, hey, we're trying to do our best here, and reaching out. In terms of the trade videos, I was curious if you can throw in the Q&A pod if it's not too busy. How are you creating those and where are you hosting them? Because you could, and we've seen people do this for training on our tool, that you set up an actual class for the instructors to participate as if they were students. And so we call it in the industry, eating your own dog food. Like, you have to then go into the class to be able to learn and watch those trade videos and discuss them. And so you can set up an actual syllabus that has the different areas of what you need them to learn. You can set up discussion topics that allow them to interact around the specific things and ask their questions, and allow all of your instructors to be able to participate. And then you can actually, and this is maybe a bit heavy-handed, it's up to how your school works, make it a requirement that your instructors are contributing. Use the analytics that are in the software. If you have comments, you have to make 3 comments on someone and provide helpful information, to be able to create and foster that engagement the same way you would in a class. Like, you have to jumpstart the class, jumpstart your instructors, make them use an online class. Then they have empathy with the students in terms of what they're learning, and they also know what they struggled with, so it's easier to get the students to engage.
Yeah, a couple more. We have lunch and learn panels with a limit of 10 participants, so we can learn from each other. We'll hire students who are excellent in Canvas after they've been trained and use them in their work study, online or in person.
I like that idea, because there's a lot of students out there who make me look old and decrepit in the rate at which they learn technology. And if they are, especially if they're in the field of looking to go into instructional design or something, what a great experience for them to be able to jump in and be the mentors and help learn.
Yep, another one is we are doing bi-weekly Zoom meetings for new and veteran online faculty to share ideas. It's worked beautifully and have learned lots.
I like that, especially if you can record those and then share those back out into the class for those that couldn't make the lunch and learn, and they can catch up on what they were doing. That conversation can continue. Like, that's the big thing, is like spring was all Zoom, all face-to-face, and it's all about, can we push that out of just the all Zoom webinar conferencing type thing and into the discussion, so that conversation can continue, because then it takes a life of its own, makes it easier on your instructors. They're not having to drive the conversation constantly into online education versus what people are labeling remote learning when you're just using web conferencing.
Yep. We are working collaboratively as a group across many schools. We have strategy sessions with high success teams, I'm assuming. I would recommend the train the trainer model. Early adopters can assist other instructors by sharing examples and collaborating with them to build content.
That works really well. I have a cousin who is a new professor in English and literacy, and she is actually in this past fall was helping 3 or 4, just of her own accord, helping 3 or 4 instructors who were elderly, not as familiar with technology, and she jumped in and helped, and they were eternally grateful. And it didn't take her much time because for her it was easy.
Yep. We are using Tech Advisory Team to guide development of PD that uses high flex strategies.
The high flex thing, I'm excited to see. I don't, this is a total aside geeking out thing. Harvard is doing a thing called Helix and has been for a bit, where they take the high flex model and put it on steroids, where they actually have multiple cameras and multiple television screens and like a live audio video mixing of the classroom to be able to blend the whole students who are remote this week and online on site next week. And man, it's amazing. I don't think it's scalable, but you should go look at it if you're just interested in a cool high steroid version of high flex.
Yeah, we have so many more, so I'll share probably another 3 or 4. Does that sound good, Marcus?
Yeah, and then if we run out of time, we can always just we'll grab them all and I guess they appear in the recording. Is that correct, Heather?
These do not, but we can grab them all. Maybe we make a sharing document afterwards that we can share out with everyone, with just
Yeah,
ideas.
definitely. Yeah, that would be cool.
So AP students and Honor Society students are always looking to accumulate volunteer hours. Create student-led virtual study hall would be a great way. As a faculty member is using Canvas early adopter and building Canvas courses for a 3-day summer grant for new faculty learners to use, and using pages, quizzes, discussions. Faculty are encouraged to bring anything they would like into it for learning.
Fantastic.
I created an online notebook for teachers to share best practices and or lessons.
Can you share, did you create that, throw this out and we can gather it later, but did you create that notebook in Canvas or did you create it in a different tool? And if so, what tool did you use that you found was good for collaboration so you're not introducing some more complex technology?
And then this last one, are there thoughts to connect higher ed instructors with K-12 instructors, such as state university administration connecting with BOEs to make it easier? Learning
That's
is learning.
fascinating. I had never thought of that, but
Yeah.
that's pretty. Jared?
There's got to be examples of that out there. I would guess that even within the state in which I live, Utah, the Utah Education Network may be doing something along those lines, but I'm not 100% sure.
Jared, is there a place in the community forums on Canvas to be able to reach out for ideas like that? I know that it's all mainly product related, but is there a space on the community forums for that?
Yeah, there are a number of spaces. You might start with the instructional designers group, even though that might sound a little bit off base, or in the, I think it's called the teacher training group. But there are a number of groups in community.canvaslms.com where there's a lot of folks who would be willing to discuss this sort of idea and share what they've done.
Yeah, because K-12, I mean, having watched my children go through it, the instructors never signed up for this, quote unquote, and they were struggling. So, and the more help that the higher ed folks who have the bandwidth, that would be amazing.
So we've had so many responses. I think we're at 43 or 45 now coming in.
Awesome.
So we will try and catalog all these and share this out in a document for everyone. Some great ideas here. Thank you.
Great. All right. Well, I'm going to go through a couple more wrap up things, and then we'll send you back on your way. So first off, the training is so crucial. We've actually shut down most of our feature development and are instead focused on putting online training in place for new instructors so that when they're using the tool, it's actually coming up and guiding them as they go. So the more you can do in terms of, even if it's a simple professional development or simple training, to be able to do that, super important. Because at this point, people need familiarity and guidance, because instead of dealing with instructors who are used to this, it's really just the simple things that really help.
Yeah,
Jared,
I'd reiterate that. I mean, for teacher trainers or faculty PD staff, anytime you use technology, anytime you stand up and host a workshop, you are modeling best practices for your instructors. And we need to keep that in mind. So if we are helping faculty learn to teach at a distance, well, conveniently right now, we're all teaching at a distance. But even in the case of blended or hybrid instruction, take the time to make it a blended and hybrid experience, one that's really high quality so that the participants remember it and that they can take ideas directly from that experience into their own practice. But aside from that, here are 3 closing tips for me on guiding instructors toward blending. Because regardless of what happens in the fall or in the spring, I strongly believe that blended and hybrid teaching and learning should be the preferred strategy for all teachers and all instructors and all faculty members, primarily because it organizes instruction and it gives the students what they need. Now, Marcus talked a little bit about how stressed students are. Something as simple as having a well-organized online website as the basis for the teaching and learning experience can reduce some of that extraneous cognitive load and alleviate some of that stress. Helping faculty and instructors learn to blend means that now it's an easier transition for them to teach with technology than it would be just to kind of drop them in the deep end with online and remote teaching. Many of them didn't have a choice this last semester. Some of them hopefully had a good experience. Some of them probably had a bad experience. And so perhaps a reframe in the fall or in the spring to focus on blended and hybrid is a good way to create some trust and some inspiration for new ways of teaching. And then finally, on that idea of new ways of teaching, when we focus our teachers and our faculty on the idea of blending, we can inspire innovation. We can challenge faculty to rethink their pedagogy and also, I hope, rethink how they use technology, especially if you're a fully online teacher and you're thinking about going back to the classroom. For me, blending creates the online framework for online or remote teaching, but it also creates a mental framework for new ways of teaching with technology.
And to back up what Jared's saying there as well, like this is not just training for fall. Like if people get frustrated because they're like, I'm having to learn all of this new stuff just for fall, just for spring, like this stuff is all backed by tons of research that it works and it makes things better for 2021, 2022, et cetera, and beyond. So, you know, framing that in terms of like, this is not something you're having to do just for this semester. This is something that makes you a better instructor, a more effective instructor, and lets you really get better results out of your students is, I think, a good thing. Okay, final poll. You know, we're curious what people feel they need the most support in. And so we can share these results out as well. You know, where are you struggling most? What are your pain points? You know, maybe we can pull this into a new webinar to be able to do some research and come back to you with ideas. So if you want to take a look, you know, while we're getting this, I'll talk through the results at the end. Additionally, you know, like I said, we're going to send out a recording. We're going to organize all the Q&A stuff and send it out so that you actually have everybody else's ideas as well. We'll figure out the most fair way we can. I didn't expect as many replies as we get to give away those 10 books we bought. But if you, we'll also send out a link to the book in case you didn't get one free to be able to pull it up and buy it yourself, or just looking into other blended learning resources as well.
We'll also be doing the Q&A after too. So if they have questions, additional ones, please put it in the Q&A pod too.
Oh, that's right. 2 Q&A sessions. My bad. Heather is the queen of organizing webinars, in case you're wondering. She is awesome. She keeps us on track. So if you have other questions other than just idea exchange or questions around things that we covered, we'll cover that as soon as this poll is over. I think we're good now in terms of respondents in the poll. Looks like best practices on balancing synchronous with asynchronous is coming in at like 62%. Need help with that. That's, I think, where a lot of this blended learning stuff comes in, which is why we brought up the topic. What other tools may benefit your students? At around 50%. I think adding new tools, if they're easy to use, is a good idea. But then again, I'm a tool vendor, so take that with a grain of salt. How to engage and communicate with students on the discussion board platform at around 40%. Like there are definitely a lot of good guides out there. The discussion boards. You know, we're going to do another webinar actually on that, and I'll talk about that after the Q&A. So if we can switch into Q&A now. Heather, what do we have in terms of additional Q&A?
Sure. Sorry about that. The poll was pausing a little on me. Are there guidelines you can share to give students to be student facilitators? And then I got a second one on student facilitators right after that is how do you reward points to student facilitators?
So we So yes, they're guidelines. We actually have it baked into our software to where you can share them in line, and we give a template. We'll go find a resource that we used when building those guidelines, and we'll share it out as a couple links in the email we follow up on. We may have to do 2 follow-up emails because I want to get the webinar to you soon. So we'll get stuff out, and then we can follow up again with some of those. And then in terms of how you grade, you actually don't grade on the submission for the students that are doing the facilitation, because they aren't required to do, in the way I've seen it implemented anyway, there's probably a lot of ways, but they're not required to actually turn in work because they are teaching and reading everything and facilitating. They are learning the work in question. And then you just go into the grade book and give them a score based on their participation and how they did. So there should be tools to look at what the student is doing, depending on what discussion platform you're using, what LMS, to say how much did they actually do the job. And then you're not grading them on whether they learn the topic as much. You're grading them on how much did they actually guide other people in learning, because they will learn more from doing that. So you give everybody else a grade on the submission, and then you give them a grade just on their participation in the discussion.
Okay. And it said, are these strategies available in Canvas, or do we need to get Harmonize?
You don't have to get Harmonize. I'd love to offer you Harmonize. That is my passion currently, to make it better. So we just make everything easier. It all works inside of, you can set up a facilitator. You just have to reach out to them personally and nominate it versus doing it in software. You can do embedded media stuff. It's a little more difficult. We make it easier to do that. We have the Zoom integration and stuff. But all of these things, we tried to stay away from things that require Harmonize, because we don't want you to have our software to prep for fall.
Jared, what is your preferred blending style for a course, the structure of it?
Oh gosh, if you're talking to me personally, what I like to do and teach, I really like a hybrid model because it does kind of force myself and the students to think about what are we doing face to face that's going to be unique from what we can do online, and what are we doing online that is taking advantage of those strengths. But I think in general, when we think about the course designs and the websites that we provide to students, it's just so important to give students a map so that they can see what we're doing every single day or every single week, and how the things that we're doing online tie back to what we're going to do in the face-to-face environment.
Yeah. Being methodical and thinking about that gap, I think, is the most important thing I've seen, to where it's like, what am I going to talk about, and what do I need to do to just make the students think before they get in there? What do they think? What are they going to bring? So then the ideas they bring actually go so much smoother in that classroom. And then the follow-up discussion. The thing I like about online discussion boards, the thing I'm passionate about them, is that, allow anonymous posting, allow avatars defining who you are, let those quiet kids come out to be able to participate. So creating that space for them both before and after the lecture. And because in Zoom, like, if you're not brave, like, I talk too much, so I'm easy to jump into conversations, but a lot of people aren't. And so creating that space intentionally for them, I think, is super key.
Okay. Advice on middle school math that was originally problem-based learning, where students work in small groups.
That is outside of my expertise. Jared, do you have something?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because so much of what we're doing with mathematics requires that sort of negotiation of meaning, right? I say something or I ask a question, and I may not know what I'm trying to ask. I may not have the words for what I'm trying to ask. And so in a physical classroom, we might go to the whiteboard or write something on a piece of paper. And so I would say in an online environment, having some of that synchronous communication available to you, and a kind of whiteboard space where students can work together on that, could be really, really helpful. But it doesn't have to be synchronous, right? If students can whiteboard or share their notes, or even create the formula or algorithms in a content editor through, say, a discussion forum or a chat tool, that can also be really effective.
Let me add that, and this does not
big disclaimer there. I'm not a math teacher, and I didn't get very far in math even in college. So.
And I'm not, this is not my forte, but something I have seen that you can look into. Zoom does breakout rooms, which allows you to do small group breakout and to be able to bounce around. A lot of the struggles that people have with Zoom and with other web conferencing is that once you get 20 people in, like having little conversations and sidebars that you would get in class is hard. And Zoom has this break everybody out into groups of threes, then they come back together, and then you can bounce around and help with what they're struggling with, or hopefully if you have a TA that can help or something in that regard as well. Um, so I don't know if that helps with math, but it's definitely a technology thing that's in some of the web conferencing for that face-to-face stuff.
Okay. Another one, what is your advice on how to start the conversation internally about sharing roles, content within university or department-wide? It's a very traditional university.
So the struggle we had in the first university we were moving in line in this was that you had to really couch it in terms of benefits. Like, it's not you're helping them, it's that you're actually going to get something out of this that makes your life easier. And it worked okay before the pandemic, like really approaching it that way of like, we're giving you a tool to make this easier, or we're helping, this person's going to help you, you're going to help them. It was all about the not you're giving, it's you're getting. I hope that now in the pandemic, that strategy actually works a little bit better because we have this more of this feel of we're all in it together. I don't have data to prove that. I haven't tried to do this since the pandemic started, but that's how we focused on it. Was this? It wasn't about you training you. It was about here's what you can get from each other that can then eventually make it easier. If you met with
Okay.
the administration, I was thinking purely in terms of instructors. If you get with the administration, the thing that we also touted there was that it's you're learning, you're lowering your training and development budget, which is a slippery slope of you have to be careful if you're going to suggest that, because you don't want to lower your training and development budget. But if you don't have training and development budget, then you're encouraging from on high as well for people to be able to participate in this sort of work share and mentorship type giving.
Okay. Another question, students could start off face-to-face and then be guided back online to continue the conversation. What are some tips to make this successful so engagement does not drop off, especially in this transition of now learning two different ways?
Jared, do you have tips on that? I have a couple technology thoughts, but maybe from a theory perspective first, if you have something.
Yeah, I know what you're going to say with technology, so I'm going to save that for you. I think in terms of the practice, teachers always want to find the right balance between participating enough themselves and trying to pull students back into the conversation if they seem to be absent. But then, balancing that with making sure students have plenty of room and that they feel like this is about them and their conversation, and that the teacher's not being overbearing in that.
Yeah, and from a technology perspective, you've heard, I don't know if you've heard of multiple due dates or multiple milestones, we call it in our software. It's this idea that students are checklist driven, like they are driven by what they have to do to get the grade. And so you actually have to set up requirements that by day 3, I want you to have posted twice. By day 5, excuse me, I want you to have commented on 3 others' posts, and set it up to where it's actually a requirement that they go in and do it. Once you prime that pump the first couple of modules, then it becomes much easier, becomes much more natural. But you do have to often make it a requirement in the first couple of weeks of this is what your expectation is. And we focused a lot on making that easier to where the student knows here's graphically what you're doing, what goals you have to achieve. But you can do that in any discussion board as long as you're clear and concise on here's what I want you to do by what date, make it the checklist that they have to do.
Okay, we have 2 more questions. So if you have a question you're trying to get in, please put it in Q&A. So the next one is, what do you think the optimal class length for students are who are doing blended learning or online learning? Especially when we first closed down, we set 75-minute classes. This was too long for being on Zoom or doing synchronous work.
Yeah, I mean, my gut feel is 50% of the duration that you could pull off in an on-site is what you're going to be able to pull off in Zoom as a maximum. So the big difference between online and on-site is that instead of 3 75-minute chunks, it's really 15 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 15 minutes there. That can equal the same amount of work for the instructor, but there is a cognitive load of making sure that they are able to stay engaged, 20 minutes on their commute, on their mobile phone or whatever, to be able to do it. So the smaller chunks, the better, because there was actually a study done that like one of the biggest indicators of success in online education was how often did you log in? And the students who logged in more were more likely to be retained and stay. So the more you can break it into small chunks of things they're doing, the better. Especially because if you're going to record that session and save it in, like I can watch a 15-minute video. If I have to watch a 55, 75-minute video, as you go. So smaller chunks are better. We have the saying that if to drop out of online school, it's just turning off your computer. So you have to constantly be poking them. Jared, did you have something on length?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, having long video conferencing sessions is so risky. One, you have to be a good presenter, or you have to have your activities designed so that students will be engaged, because there is plenty of evidence that in lectures or even in watching a recorded video, students' attention falls off after 10 minutes. So John Medina, actually in his Brain Rules book, talks about why it's so important, therefore, to structure any presentations or lectures for that 10-minute chunk. But two, when you've got students on Zoom, distractions are just a click away. And while in a face-to-face classroom, you can kind of look over their shoulders and just kind of being physically present may deter students from distracting themselves. Nothing's going to do that on a Zoom. So just be very cautious with those longer video conferencing sessions.
Okay, and the last question is, I entered the webinar link. Can you tell me the relationship between Harmonize and Instructure?
Yeah, we're partner. We're part of the Art Partner Instructure Network. So we're a tool that plugs into Canvas's LMS and other LMSs as well. So we would be another left menu item in your course to be able to run discussion forums there if you're looking for more of a media-centric or richer discussion. So they're the people that build everything about the LMS and are responsible for everything, and we are responsible. Our thing we've taken on is just making chat and discussions better. So we're really, really focused on a very small segment where they're solving all of the problems as we go.
And that wraps up the Q&A section.
All right. Cool. So like I said, we'll send out the recording. We have another webinar coming up June 4th where we will dive deeper into our tool if you're interested. And we can give you a demo on that if you'd prefer something personal versus a webinar. And so thank you. Jared, do you have any parting thoughts? I think Jared froze. You're on mute, Jared.
I don't think I'm on mute, but if you can hear me, thank you for joining and participating. I learn a lot from these Q&As. If you can't hear me.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.